You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast. For this episode, delighted to be joined by Lisa Morton, the founder and CEO of Roland Dransfield.
Dransfield, yeah.
Dransfield, thank you for helping me. Lisa, delighted to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for asking me to join. Thank you.
No worries. Typical fashion of the show, we start with early influences, 3-4 minutes getting to know who you are. I know you went to uni in Birmingham, but that's not your accent. So tell me, where'd you grow up and what was life like growing up? Any hobbies, standout favorite memories?
Yeah, so I was born in Manchester, but then I grew up in Salford. I grew up there till I went off to university at 18 to Birmingham. In terms of the name of a business, Roland Dransfield, is actually the name of my godfather. And he was a massive influence in my life because he met my dad when my dad used to service his cars. So my dad was a mechanic, and he got to know my dad, and he thought my dad's customer service and his quality of work was fantastic. And he offered him a job in his business, and he was a Salfordian and had built a business up in engineering, kind of rags to riches, and took my dad under his wing. So dad worked with Roland for a long time, until Roland passed away, in actual fact, and had a business with him. But I remember one day Roland came to my house when I was about 8 years old in Salford, and he'd always told me that I should have my own business because he said that the word job means just over broke. So he said, so you've got to, if you have your own business, you're going to have some crap years, you'll have some great years, but you're in control largely. So I always looked up to him. And one day he came to my mum's house when I was about 8, and he had a bucket and a sponge. And it was a Sunday morning, and he said, right, he said, you're in business now, go and wash all the neighbours' cars. And at the end of the day, you got to come back and you got to pay me for the bucket and the sponge. Then you're in business. So he said, and if you can't pay me at the end of the day, you pay me at the end of next Sunday when you've washed more cars. So you understand what business is, and you've got to break even to start your business. So anyway, I was in profit day one. And I had a car washing around then till I was 15, and I started to work in a shoe shop because I fell in love with shoes. So he was a massive influence in me. You know, he was like my business. I mean, then my dad, obviously, he was an entrepreneur. But yeah, so I was instilled in business from a very early age, and that's why I decided to call the business after him.
Wow, amazing story. I had no clue that was why the business was called it. But talking about influences, that was actually, you've already answered the question. I usually ask people, can you think of someone who had a massive impact on you in your early life? And you've already answered that. So Birmingham, in university, you did a BA in English and French.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a reason behind picking those two subjects?
Well, I loved English. I always loved writing. So I loved literature. I've read books from being a kid. I was fascinated by different authors. And I used to also write and illustrate books as a kid, like the whole series of stories, mainly about girls being in boarding school. I think it's probably influenced by Enid Blyton at the time. So I loved all of that. And then I just love languages. So I chose to do French. And actually after university, I went to France for 9 months. I lived in Provence and worked out there just in a local job. But I actually followed a boy there, to be fair. And then awesome. I found, but it was a great, opportunity to use my French, and I absolutely loved it. I ended up though with I think the equivalent of a Birmingham accent in France, because it was in deep Provence, and that's a very, very strong accent. When I got there, I couldn't understand a word, and I came home when nobody who spoke French, unless they were from Provence, could understand me. So it was an experience.
I lived in France as well for 6-7 months, and I came back not speaking a word of French. I still regret it to today.
That's not the plan. How did you manage that?
I just stayed friends with the 2 girls I went over with, and we all spoke English to each other and didn't bother. What I'd like to do though here, Lisa, is I'd like to rewind the clock to 1989, and I'll tell you why. Because statistics show that most people start their business in their late 30s, and I'm 28, and I've owned my own business for the last 6 years or so I'm not part of the statistics, and neither are you. But I know that there's a gap between, and I'm not exposing you here, but I know there's a gap of about 6-7 years between when you graduated Birmingham to when you started your current business, and you had a 3 or 4 year stint in, I believe it was ICA, advertising and marketing. So the question here is, in those kind of 7 years before you ventured out by yourself and started your own business, I'm assuming you had a variety of different jobs. Don't know what the jobs were, but what skills or behaviors do you think that you improved or learned that helped you going into starting your own first company in those kind of 3 to 7 years?
Yeah. So my first job was straight out of university. I got a job in London, in actual fact, in advertising, and then I went down for the induction, which was a few months before I was supposed to start, and I couldn't. Well, in those days there were no flat vowels in London. It was a very different state. They were it was, yeah, I found the whole setup there not to my liking, and I always wanted to be a communicator and to write. So much to my mum's disappointment, I came back to Salford and there were no jobs. It was 89. I mean, it was in the middle of a recession. Manchester was still post-industrial city. There were very few opportunities, and I found one working for a one-man band after I'd sent off about 100 letters to, various agencies, handwritten. So if you make a mistake, that's in the bin, you start again. And my kids can't believe I started a business without the internet. That's the other thing. But I got this job, and then I went on I went to France for 9 months, and then I got another job. And the thing that I realised was the absolute cookie cutter. If you weren't in it from a privileged background where the connections had been made for you, or the whole, your dad could get you a job somewhere because he's been a professional background. I knew, I could see from day one that I would have to, my lift wasn't going straight to the top. In actual fact, I was starting from scratch, and that those relationships that I created were what would become my stock and my currency. So that means that you've got to be very focused on your values and showing up and having integrity. I didn't know in 89 when I started my career that I would still have a business in Manchester, 30 odd years after starting work. It's just the way it's worked out. We've now got an office in London and we've got an LA partnership, but my network are the people who have really had the same integrity in that 25 years, 30 years in Greater Manchester or the Northwest in the main. It's now extended to London. And I saw in one of the small businesses I work for, I saw what I think is the expression is that long summer, short career. And that's, if you want to smash and grab and try and, take territory and have very quick wins, that's okay in the short term. You can make great profit or you can get the big job, but it's the long game that's going to keep you in business. And that I realized, I think it's different possibly, and I might be generalizing here, but I think in those days, I never expected it to be easy. I expected it to be really tough. I expected to have to do crazy long hours. And that was part of the attraction to me, like that graft part. So it was never an issue. It was the norm. And I think I would have not liked it any other way. Whereas I do see now, you get younger people who, you see come into business, they expect those successes much sooner on. Whereas I can categorically say that it's the small things you do every single day, the small things that you do without questioning, that you don't ask for accolades for, that sustain you in a lifelong career, that's not just profitable, but it's future proofed. We've just come through COVID. It hit us like a ton of bricks. I mean, my business literally fell off a cliff because of the type of work we did overnight. But we kept going, we kept being valuable, we kept putting more in than we took out. And as a result of that, it has put our business on another level in the past 2 years. We're at different tables than we were ever at because we had integrity. And the stuff I learned being very young in my career that some leaders didn't show and some leaders really did show, it's that stuff which is the magic dust, really, I think, that sustains a really healthy and long-term business.
I don't know why some of my friends who've gone into corporate roles nowadays expect to get medals just for participating. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You're now the CEO and founder at Roland Dransfield. Rather than me tell the audience what it is, you're the CEO. The mic is yours. What is it that you do?
Okay, so we build relationships with people and we create connections and we help put businesses and brands and individuals together. And the thing that is our purpose, really, so rather than people say we do PR, we do social media, we do digital, we don't. There are some of the tools that we use, but what we're essentially doing is the purpose is to bring people together and to help those, businesses and brands create more good stuff, do better business by being aligned together. So for me, a great day is when I can put a business with a charitable foundation, and that organization can benefit that charitable organization, and that they can create a legacy together. So we've had lots of iterations of the business. In the early days, it was a traditional PR company, and we would get our clients great coverage in the media, or we would create an amazing event for them, which would help their bottom line, or it would help push the business forward. But we've got so many more tools now to create those relationships. But I think after 25 years in a business, what people come to Roland Dransfield for is they know that it's kind of one phone call from the Pope, or it's a phone call straight into the CEO, or they know we can help to create their networks and make their lives of the people that work for them and their businesses kind of more valid and have more purpose too. So that's what we do.
You've said there in the sentence, 25 years in business. That's remarkable to achieve that. This time of year, particularly October, November, a lot of CEOs sitting around the table talking about strategy as they go forward. So for someone who's been in the business for 25 years, as you think of the audience that you're talking to now being CEOs who are sat around that table, with all your experience, what are some of the blind spots that you think those CEOs should be aware of as they continue to try grow their company? And by blind spots, I mean not focusing on lead generation, not building their bench, not hiring properly, not having a common language amongst their team. What are some of the things that you think could hold other CEOs back as they try and build their business?
Well, for me, it's absolutely about taking the time to really figure out your values as a CEO, as a leader. And your organization may have values in place already. They may be on the wall, they may be through the DNA of your organization like ours are, but they're more likely to be in a drawer. They may have been developed by an agency or a previous cohort of people in your company, and they're not relevant. And if you ask any of your team to stand up and say, what do we stand for? They won't know. But that's probably also because the CEO or the leader of the business probably hasn't really done that work on themselves either. So do you know what you stand for? If somebody said to me, tell me what your values are, can you tell them, where your boundaries are, what your non-negotiables are, what you will not accept as a leader or as a human being? So I would say at this time of year, hopefully this is the only time we ever get normally an uninterrupted 2 weeks off, to do this piece of work now. Really sit down with yourself and take that time to think, how am I showing up? Is what I thought I stood for and how I wanted to live my life or live through the business, is it the same now as it was 3 years ago? Was it certainly before COVID? That's the blind spot. And I'll tell you why it's a blind spot, because we had not done that work. I knew what I stood for, but I was allowing other people in the business at that time, not with us anymore, to pull me away from what was really, truly important to me. And as a result, the tail was wagging the dog. And there was an existential scenario that came up. And I thought, no, I am going to change this around. I'm going to really figure out what is right for me. How do I want to come into this office every day? This is my life. It's my creation. And yet I'm allowing other people to dictate how we do things or what our integrity levels are. So I sat down with the team, told them that's what we're going to do. And I said, if anyone wants to leave, you're more than, you can leave. It's fine. No hard feelings. But this is what we're going to do. So I did get a great mentor to help me do this, somebody who I'd met through football. In actual fact, he's had a sports and a finance background. But first of all, I had to do that work on myself. And I had to be really brutal with myself, and to accept that, because I'd not really set my values, I couldn't be aware when those values were being undermined.
Wow.
I didn't know what my boundaries were at that point. I didn't know what my non-negotiables were. So when I really spent time to do that, I knew where my line was. And then we moved those values into the business, and we have made them the DNA of the business. And those values kept us going through COVID. I remember on the day before, we were all crowded around a laptop watching the Prime Minister's announcement, and we were going to be working at home for a day to see if we could all do it. And we'd had our war plan, like, you know, if you're ill, what's your backup plan? You know, everyone had no clue what was going on then. But as people left the office, I stood in front of the wall where we have all our values on the wall, and I stood in front of them for 20 minutes. And I thought, we might not come in on Thursday. We might not come back in this office for a very long time. But when we do, although the business could be very, very different, the values will stay the same. And they did. And they are the things that have made our business. We're in a way better position than we were even before COVID now because of those values. So that's the blind spot. That was a blind spot for me for a long time. And I think had I done that work considerable time before that, we wouldn't have had to go through that very, very difficult time as a business, which was very disruptive and challenging to actually instill those values. So that's the piece of work. And you know what? The clients come, the leads come, the connections come, great people come, the crap ones go. It's the DNA. And, you know, we are now known, you know, our brand is our values. That's what our brand is.
Fair play to you. That can't have been easy. It does sound like you were previously working in your business and you flipped that to work on your business. And as a result, you've now got a business that you're proud of.
Very much so.
I've spoken to a guy called Eric Fullwiler a number of times. He's originally from the States, came over to help set up VaynerMedia, owned by Gary Vaynerchuk, and a couple of other companies. Now he's going up by himself, and he was chatting to me a couple of weeks ago, and he said 95% of B2B buyers, and I'm reading this because I wrote it down, aren't in the market at any one time. And what he sees is that most marketers are trying to move people down a funnel to buy now. But if you go back to the stat that he referenced, that 95% of people in the B2B world aren't actually ready to buy at that particular time. With that in mind, what do you think marketers should focus on instead of trying to move people down a funnel? Is it winning attention and creative positive connection so that when they are ready to buy, they're familiar with your services and they go to you?
Yeah, that for me, I mean, we're an independent business, so you know, I don't have somebody sitting on my shoulder telling me that I've got to produce a certain amount of revenue. I mean, I know what we have to meet in terms of overhead. I know what our margins need to be, and I know what kind of profit we'd like to go for. But more than that, and it, you know, there is a luxury in this because it's an independent business. You know, I'm the shareholder. Our driver is purpose. And what we found in the past 3 years that since we've really focused on doing good business with good people, that high quality of referrals. I mean, I've read loads of these, but you know, you're not supposed to rely on referrals. You're supposed to have an active outward, you know, business development program. We don't really have that. We don't do leads gen per se. We've tried it. I found it didn't really work for us. What we do is, I would say that you're right, you don't get the conversions immediately, but by going out doing good things, we do a lot of charitable work in our, you know, in our environment. I suppose we're known for really caring about stuff. So people come to us because it's all those soft things. You know, they might have an agency now. We wouldn't chase that up, but they'll just see we do promote the work we do, but more importantly, other people promote the work we do in our communities, and that just does bring that work in. So I get it. It's work. Life is about relationships. People want to do business with people they like and they trust, and that's how it'll come in. And you know, incredibly, you know, we don't go on a lot of pitch lists, if I'm honest. I'm not saying we don't get asked to pitch or present, but we're not often asked to go on a list that's got 12 other agencies on it. People tend to come to us because that's it. They decided they want to work with us. It might take a couple of years, but we have got a big workflow now of people who want to talk to us. So we're not short of that business. But again, I have to caveat with the point that, you know, we're an SME, and I don't have to be pulling in millions of pounds worth of new fees every year.
You don't have quarters to hit targets to hit every quarter as well. You mentioned referrals. I actually think very few people are good at asking for them. Very few ask for them, and those that ask them are very poor at asking for them. Because if you think of it, you've only actually really, and I'm on your side on referrals here, you've only actually really got to make your very first sale. And based off that, you can build a business off referrals after that. You know, David Sandler, who founded Sandler Sales Training, which works with most of the large companies across the world, he's come out, he's dead now, but he has said as well, you know, you've only got to make one sale, which is their very first sale, and after that you can grow a business purely off referrals.
Yeah, I agree with that, and it's an interesting point, because I think, you know, we have tried to engage with business development people or organizations, and I totally get what you're saying, because we had that happen to us, that we did get through a LinkedIn campaign. In actual fact, we did get one piece of work. It's only small, it's grown, it's massive, it's become so big. So I do know it works, but it's either as a CEO or a leader, if you've got to do that yourself, even though you're working on your business, you don't really have that time. But it's trying to find the right partner, isn't it? If we could find the right partner, I would certainly give it a go, because I think you're right. The small things that you can create now, they can, over the next 5 years, they can change your business.
You have won numerous awards. Some of the awards in more recent years include PR Marketing Agency of the Year, Marketing Personality of the Year, Best PR and Social Agency Campaign. I could list many more, but the question I have here is, I feel like many people are scared or worried. There's something that holds them back from putting themselves forward for these awards. Having been on the other end of it and won a lot of awards, what would you say for someone who's perhaps hesitant for putting themselves forward for the awards? How has it helped you guys, if anything, from team morale or just letting your current clients know that they're actually working with the best out there?
Yeah, well, we did that for years. And I think when I first started the business, I did enter a few awards and we won stuff early on. And then, as you said before, you know, it's working in the business, not on the business. So as we got a bit bigger, we had a bit more space and resource to put some of those awards in. But for me, it was, and we've won loads more since we did the values piece 3 years ago, because I think it gave us the confidence to really believe that, you know, we did know what we stood for and we're dead proud of it. But for the team, one of our values is leaders create leaders. And so for me, you know, that's the point, that you can be a leader at any age, any level of experience. It's how you show up in life that makes you a leader, not, you know, how long your CV is or, you know, your LinkedIn profile. So we resource the team. So the team would say, I really feel strongly that I want to put this, you know, this submission in. So they would write the award. And then, you know, when you win that, and you know that that's been won through the passion and the commitment and the excitement of that person that's put the award in, it makes it all the better. And I used to be a bit dismissive of awards. Honestly, I did. And I thought, you know, well, Roland Dransfield used to say, stars don't make a noise, they just shine. So I grew up with that. And so I, you know, but you know, it's false modesty in a way, because it's not just you as an individual. That's not an ego thing. It's for your team. And I know and yes, it does make a difference when you do show those accolades to your clients, and they, you know, you can go into a pitch or a new relationship and say, we've got these, because it, you know, they're from good organizations with great judges. And yeah, we're very glad of the awards that we've won, and particularly recently, because they've been won in a difficult time.
For sure. 3 questions left for you, Lisa. Is there a tool out there that you could not live without? And when I say tool, it could be a communication tool that you use to communicate within your team. It could Slack, Zoom, Teams. It could be an app on your phone, something that if it was removed from your life, it would cause more pain than anything.
Apart from my new executive assistant, who I've just found after 25 years, she's like, it's taken me 25 years to find the one, which is amazing. The thing that I found has been incredible is Otter AI, which is, oh my God, that has been life changing. So I've got a podcast as well, which is called We Built This City. And that's conversations with Mancunians born, bred or adopted. And I started that just before lockdown, before I knew there was going to be a lockdown. We've won a British Podcast Award for that. But so I interview Mancunians born, bred or adopted, and get them to talk about their values, their relationships and purpose. But for me to prepare for those, like you've done a lot of prep for this, I found Otter, and I can just, all my questions, all my ideas go into that, and it just literally transcribes it all, and I can edit it a little bit, and it saves hours and hours of my time. So the whole team is now obsessed with it.
Here's one for you that you might get obsessed with then, because I've had this podcast for a while and I use a tool called Descript.ai.
Okay.
What it will do, and only because you said Mancunians, and I don't know if that's your target audience, but I'm sure I have an accent to you. It removes all the ums, the ahs, the buts, the maybes instantly. So you load up your audio version of your podcast to Descript.ai, and then it'll come with a written template of everything, and it will highlight all the little ums and ahs and things, and you press one button and it removes them instantly, but it doesn't change anything with the podcast. So, you're
Wow.
taking 4 or 5 minutes out of it, we're removing all those pauses, but it still
Oh,
keeps the podcast.
Well, I'm going to look into that. And that's amazing. Does it take out the accent? Does it understand accents? Because the one I've Otter is American. So if I say Mancunians, which I say a lot, obviously, with it being about Manchester, it comes up as Manky Onions, which is Manky is a really obviously Mancunian word, but it's Manky Onions. And our mayor is called Andy Burnham, and it comes up as Randy Burner. So it'd be great to go.
Well, with the script, and I know this because I've done it, where it gives you a script and it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to read it. And once you've read it, it will recognize your voice, and it will be able to better script out what you're saying than any of those other tools like Otter.ai. I have used Otter.ai, and I know people who still use it, but I just prefer the script because it's Otter.ai plus the ability to remove all the filler words as well.
I'm on it straight away. Definitely. Thank you.
No worries. 2 final questions for you, Lisa. This one usually throws people, usually gets them to think for a second or two. So don't worry if you have to pause, but what's your personal definition of success?
Yeah, my personal definition of success is that when at the end of the day, I feel that I've created some magic by getting people together that perhaps didn't know each other before, but when they meet each other, they realize the enormity of what they can achieve by putting their skill sets and their connections together.
I like it, and you didn't have to pause as well, which is a good thing that you know what success means to you.
Yeah.
Final question for you. You're in charge of adding a mandatory subject to the secondary school curriculum. What would you add and why?
I would add to it building relationships and the importance of putting in more than you take out. So that is about sustaining. It doesn't necessarily need to be professional, but in your life, it's like the bank account. If you put stuff in more than you take out, you can afford to take some credits at times when you can afford to take some debits at times when they're difficult. And I think that also helps young people to understand that it's not all about what you can get today. It's about what you can give today, but then what you will get down the line as a result of putting that work in.
I was going to say you'd make a great podcast host, but I can see why you're a good podcast host now. Lisa, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. I'll leave links to both your personal LinkedIn and the company website below if anybody wants to get in contact. But for today, thanks a million and have a great weekend.
Thank you.